Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we're here for our post-combine mock draft. Now that the festivities have ended, right? We saw the offensive lineman on the field today. This will be out tomorrow, I guess, so it'll be a different day for you guys. But this is all wrapped up, so it's time to reevaluate. What are the options for the Jaguars? What might be happening in front of them? And what is going to be the pick in April? And honestly, well, we got some answers, and I think some things are becoming more clear, or you can at least see where it could be heading. It's still very up in the air for Jacksonville. I think this is one of the hardest picks to nail this year. And it's a sharp turn from where I thought this was going at the start of it, where I remember putting out a tweet saying, yeah, I think Will Johnson is like the obvious pick for the Jaguars, and you can pretty much just lock that in because no one was going to take him in the top four. It's a big need. It's a great player. It's an incredible player. At least you thought that at the time, although some teams are apparently scouts think he sucks now for whatever reason because of like high-end speed or something like that. But Will Johnson seemed like the guy, and now it's very open, right? And you see a lot of people just say Mason Graham, and I don't fully believe that's exactly what will happen. I think it could, for sure. I think it's in the cards. But I think this is very open to interpretation. So, with that all said, you're going to see this has already started. This is because I want to have this be somewhat realistic, and this simulator honestly sucks right now. No offense. I actually feel kind of bad saying that. But the order that players are going in is extremely unrealistic. Like, every single time, either a quarterback falls into your lap to where you can trade out, or Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter falls. I don't think either of those things are happening. I think these four players are going in the top four picks. And if it doesn't happen like that, I'd be surprised, or I'd at least have to say it would have to come in the form of the Patriots doing something different at four and just saying, hey, we're going to go get our guy, right? Maybe you see Abdul Carter go early, and then they decide to take a Mason Graham over a Travis Hunter, or something like that. That is possible, but I think it's rather unrealistic for what's going to happen. And even if this isn't where all the players end up, this does at least leave us in a position where, hey, it makes sense who's on the board, at least. So with that said, what do the Jaguars do? Well, there's a different answer if any of these players fall. Because I think a quarterback's there, you trade back. If I think Hunter or Carter are there, you're taking. I think those are just incredible values. But when that's not the case, this is a very wide open question. Because I don't think there is a clear fifth player that stands out among the others, if I'm being honest. I think McMillan, he's a really good receiver prospect. I don't know about top five for him. I think he's going to be really good, but this is a high pick. This is a really high pick. You want to get an elite player here. And I mean elite. I don't mean like hope to be elite. I mean a player who is going to be elite in the NFL. And McMillan is a really good prospect. I don't know if he plays to that level necessarily. I think Mason Graham is a very refined player, someone who is probably one of the safest bets in the first round if you want to get your pick right. But honestly, I think there's legit concerns about the size for him. I think he's a smaller player. He came in under 300 pounds at the combine. That was not expected. But this guy was 296. And some of that is just, hey, these guys get their weight down so they can compete. Maybe he's preparing for his pro day because he didn't do anything at the combine except interviews pretty much and measurements like a lot of these other guys. But that's a concern for me with Mason Graham where, yeah, I think he's going to be a hit. But when we look back at this in a couple years, is he a top five player? And I don't think the answer will be yes, because I think there will be a lot of other players who have the potential to elevate themselves above that. So, just my thoughts on Mason Graham. I think Ashton Genty, he could be the dark horse here. It is really possible, but it depends on how they view the backfield in Jacksonville. And I say this because running back, the value of the position, I think, is going to go up. And while there is a lot of players you could take in this class, a lot of guys I really like, to get a player like Ashton Genty, you could absolutely justify it this high in the draft. It is just a question of, this is the direction the Jaguars should go. This is the best player they can get. I think he's going to be phenomenal in the NFL. But I just don't know that this would be the best pick for the Jaguars. But I think it is a dark horse that's not really being talked about enough right now. Not that I think it is by any means the favorite. I just think it's a possibility depending on how they see their backfield. Because if they're not sold on ETN and not sold on Tank Bigsby, you're not going to have prospects like this come around all the time. So I think it could be in play. You also hear a lot of talk about tackles or potential guard converts because they want to do work on the offensive line. I think clearly if you add a player, they're going to have to play guard. If they move Walker Little into guard, I think that's going to be a disaster again. I think that's going to be a waste of money. But, that's up to them. And if they get a great tackle, then I guess it'd be okay. But I just wouldn't expect that. I think Walker Little is going to be the tackle for this team for the next 2 years. So you're not looking at any kind of change in regards to that. You're adding a guard. And is a guard worth a fifth overall pick? And I think if you get the right one, it could be. And maybe you feel like Will Campbell can be that. It's just hard for me to say, hey, I believe Will Campbell converting to guard is going to be so much better than what I could get in the teens if I moved back. And if I had the opportunity, of course, that I would spend the pick at number 5 to take that play. I have a really hard time with that because I also think you could just move back and go get a Tyler Booker or go get an Armand Membu. I guess he would be moving inside, but I believe he's played a little bit of guard before. So he at least has some experience. I think that would make a lot more sense than spending the pick on Will Campbell. And I don't think you would even have to pick him here. I think you could move back a few spots and probably still get him. So, it depends on trade market. That's, of course, a big part of this. But I wouldn't take Will Campbell this high. So that kind of doesn't leave you with a lot of options. I think the last guy you talked about is Will Johnson, and I still think he's a great prospect. But there's now all these questions arising, and you don't know what's really true and what's bullcrap, because there's a lot of bullcrap around this time of year regarding the draft. We hear some ridiculous stuff. So, who knows? But I still think he's a great player. With that said, this is going to be a pick I would trade in this scenario. That would be the best case scenario to me. It's a question of, what teams do you trade with? I think the Jets could be possible if they see a player that they want to hop the Raiders for. That could be a situation. Maybe they're in love with a Mason Graham. They want to get someone who can stop the run and bring a lot in that regard. I could also see a team like maybe the San Francisco 49ers, who they have a lot of draft capital. I'll take a look at it really quick. Where they've got 11 picks. They might want to move up and go get a Mason Graham. Go get that caliber of player. That is in the cards. The one we're going to do, and this kind of goes off the idea that Ashton Genty is in play for the Raiders. I could see Chicago getting aggressive and moving up to 5. And I'm not saying that's the most likely thing. I'm just saying I could see a world where that happens. Because you think about the guy who's head coach there and what situation he came from. The Lions were ready to take Jahmyr Gibbs at 6th overall. They were going to do it there. Made that very clear. So with a player like Ashton Genty, who I would say is a better prospect than Jahmyr Gibbs, as successful as Gibbs has been in the NFL, if you can grab an Ashton Genty, you're probably having to do it around this range. You might feel like you have to. If they think the Raiders could take him, and we know how much they value that position, or at least Ben Johnson would, I think they could get aggressive, try to make some noise, and say, hey, we're going to move up to 5 with Jacksonville, and we want to get Ashton Genty at this point. And that's going to be what we're going to do here. So as far as what it would cost, this is an interesting conversation. I don't know if it's a second. I think that's a little rich here maybe Jacksonville could get that out of them. But your difference in points is 468 for 5, 369 for 10. It's about 99 points. So that's going to be worth about 55 to 56 in the draft. And we see, obviously, the Bears don't have a pick that's necessarily in that range. Now, we know Gladstone likes to have a lot of draft picks, likes to do a lot of trading, and he's hinted towards that quite a bit. If you say you took 72, that is almost, it's about 2/3 of the way there. Maybe you're taking a future third from them on top of that and calling that a fair trade. I could see something like that. So Chicago keeps their 2 seconds, which they could move one of them, just given how much draft capital they have there. But in this scenario, we're going to say they move 72, we get a future third next year, and we move back from 5 to number 10. We see, of course, the simulator says, screw that, we're taking Tedero and McMillan. So we're going to assume Ashton Genty's not here. We're also going to just ignore Tedero and McMillan being gone and assume he's not here as well. So as far as your options, because we're ignoring Genty, he would be the pick here otherwise. I think Jahdae Barron, he'd be a fun conversation. I just don't know if I'd want him to play outside corner. And if they were to do this, I think you would have to say that Jahdae Barron to them would be mainly a slot, that he would be taking the role from Jarion Jones, and that they just thought that player was that good that they would take him. And if they did that, I think, obviously, you have the big question of, okay, you just replace a starter who was doing fine with a really good starter. How much value is that in the first round? I still think Barron is just such an incredible player and a prospect, especially if they're running a 4.39 with all the intellect that he has on top of that and how smart he is, the Brian Branch type of comparisons, which are warranted as far as the mental side of things. That kind of player with that kind of speed, I wouldn't question it if Jacksonville took him. I really wouldn't. And maybe he does play outside and keep up there. He's about 5'10.5", so he doesn't have the best size for it. This could be someone you take. And maybe I'll talk myself into it by the time we make this pick. Tyler Warren, I think he would be a really fun player to take here as well. I think he's going to be an awesome tight end. It's a question of, do they want to do 2 tight end sets that much? Is that going to be a big part of the offense? Because if it was, then this is a great pick. If you're moving on from Evan Ingram as well. And I'm kind of guessing they are, but I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know at this point. Jahad Campbell, he had a hell of a process during the combine. I'm still not taking him at 10, especially as a linebacker. James Pierce as well. There's some weird talk around him if he might fall down the board, talking about just because of character and being uncoachable, apparently, that he might not go in the top 64, which feels a little crazy to me. I don't think he'll fall nearly that far, but you're not taking him at 10. Is my thought on that. Mike Green's another great player, but you also have other questions with him, right? The accusations that come from high school to his time at Virginia, and I'm not going to get into any of that or give an opinion on that, guys. We don't know, right? We don't have personal access to the details of that. We don't know who these people are for sure, and I don't think it's fair to comment on that without knowing. So it's a concern, and I would want to know before I pick the player like that. So without that information, I would have to go in their direction. So who does that leave us? Will Johnson, who I think would probably just be the best pick here. Kenneth Grant as well. He'd be your run stopper on the interior. Be a position that you don't have. I love Josh Simmons, right? You know that. But obviously, you've got your tackle situation pretty filled out at this point. And there's some other players we could talk about, maybe go in the teens here. But I think at this point, you kind of have one player who you probably end up taking here. It's either between Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron. It's going to be corner. I think between these two guys. Call me crazy. I think I am going to take Jahdae Barron here. I know he doesn't have the same size He does have great athleticism, though. I think he's an incredibly instinctual player. I think that he's a guy that it would be damn near impossible to miss on. Don't quote me on that if I miss on him, by the way. Uh, but I think he's gonna work in the NFL wherever he plays, and this fits what the Jaguars want with intangibles. So we're gonna get a little crazy, and we're gonna pick Ja'Day Barrett at number 10. So something different, right? Because we've gone the Will Johnson route before. That's some of the thinking here. We're gonna get that type of player. Now I am gonna look really quick. I don't know if anyone's. I can't really tell who's available at this point, unfortunately, because PFF doesn't show us any players who are available. So I'm sure I'll see someone I would like to have traded up for. But we're just going to run this out. Yeah, Josh Simmons would have been that player. All right, so picking here at 36. I'm going to start with saying this. Colston Loveland's not going to be here. Stupid that he fell. Other options. Jack Betch. I think this is a little rich, but I think he's going to be a really good player in the NFL. Let's see what else we got. Maxwell Harrison, I'm a fan of. Just not going to be a direction you would necessarily go here. Tyler Booker. Still going to say this is falling too far. You're going to take him off the board for that reason. Other options. Not really the greatest board, I would say. Azareye'h Thomas, I think, could be here. Probably is gone, though. Travion Henderson would be a really nice running back to add. You've got some other options here you might like further down the board. It's kind of a hard pick, man, because I don't know if there's a player that I love the value. And this might be the problem you run into late in the first, early in the second, where you may not have players on your board that are really worth where you're selecting. Like, I may be picking at 32 and not have a first-round grade. So that's a concern. Kevin Winston Jr. is a player I like. Jalen Royals is another one. He ended up actually coming in at 6 foot, running nearly in the 4.3s, and he's got a broken foot as well. Or he's got a foot injury he's recovering from. So that's something to consider. Maybe we take a player like that. Nick Amanwari. Definitely got to note him, but once again, I don't think he's going to be available here. It is possible, but this is a guy that just had one of the craziest tests ever at the safety position. So it's kind of hard for me to believe that he's going to end up making it this far in the process. Alfred Collins, he was someone who came in really big. He's got some great size. Also a great run defender right now. I think he could be someone that would be a nice pick. Still, it's a little rich for me. And a lot of these are a little rich for me. I can't tell I'm having a hard time deciding who to pick. It would be easy if I just could choose anyone, because I pick Colston Loveland, but he's not falling this far. So, man, this is a rough situation. I'm going to look back at dates, or the second one again. I think I know what we're going to do. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a reach. And I think you guys will somewhat understand, with this board, a lot of the players that would be good picks here, I just don't think are going to be available. Josh Connerly, you could note, he's a tackle, though. You're not going to need that position unless they just decide to scratch the Walker Little contract, which I'd be shocked if they did that. But I think at this point, let's get another high character, intangibles guy. Still a tough player, though, right? We're not talking about just bringing in Eagle Scouts. Still kind of hate that term as an Eagle Scout, but you get what I mean, right? Guys who are a little too nice to play football. Jack Betch is not one of those guys, right? You can love the character, love all that stuff. He is a physical player, right? And some people have talked about some Puka Nakua to his game for fair reasons. I don't think he's going to be necessarily that level of player. That's a massive projection to give someone. But do I think he can come in, maybe play in the slot for Jacksonville, help out the run game, be a good route runner, and contribute to this offense? Yeah, I think he could. So we're going to go a little bit different here. We're going to take Jack Betch. And some people are probably going to be panicking because they're like, wow, you reached on every pick. I think that, honestly, like I said, a lot of these good options are not going to be available where they're being shown here. We'll see what's available at 70. And of course, one of the players we would have taken is taken at 69. It's just how this works. Well, I think I know which direction I'm going with this. You got some really good options here. You got 2 back-to-back picks. And I think, for me, this would be pretty easily, just making sure I'm not missing anyone here. Yeah, so this would be Kevin Winston Jr. and Jalen Royals would be the 2 players I'd consider. Although Royals, you just took a receiver, so maybe we don't go that direction. That'll be something we think about. Benjamin Morrison, I don't think he falls this far. It's another example of a player that we're just not going to consider as available at this point. This is going to be quick. We're going to do this pick. It's going to be Kevin Winston Jr. So Winston, he was actually my top safety going into the year. Got hurt early in the season after an electric start. He came in with incredible size at the combine. He was like 215 pounds. Right? This is a big guy. And he's a playmaker, right? You have big needs in the secondary. I would not let Darnell Savage stop you from addressing this position. So we're going to take a great player who fell too far because of an injury in Kevin Winston Jr. Now, this could be Jalen Royals for me. And maybe it will be just for the sake of let's take the highest rated or the best player on my board. That could definitely be in the conversation. Wyatt Milam, man, this could also be the direction we go. We haven't given him enough love recently. There are some concerns. Like, I don't think he did great at the Senior Bowl, but I do think that Milam is going to be a pretty good NFL player. And I think he'd be worth taking a shot on there. I don't see anyone else that I would pick here. I see guys I'd take later, for sure. It's going to be Jalen Royals or Wyatt Milam. And given, especially, that we took a receiver, and we've locked down that position a little bit more, I'm going to say that we're going to address the offensive line. So far, we've got a corner, we've got a wide receiver, and a safety. So we haven't done a ton to the offense aside from getting Jack Betch. So we're going to take Wyatt Milam here. We're going to play him at guard. He's going to kick inside, and we're going to hope he plays well there. And worst case scenario, you got a hell of a tackle prospect. So see some players might like go off the board here, right? Jalen Royals, RJ Harvey. Royals would have fell this far. I went to pick him just because I don't think he's there. I don't think he really even would have been available in the 3rd, to be fair, but it's not egregious enough. RJ Harvey, this might be about where he goes. Now we have 88. We have 106. See running backs starting to go. Not a ton of, like, elite options here. I think this is a position you want to address, though. And I've got my favorite player there who will probably be picking. And we're going to be picking him a lot. You'll see who he is in just a second, because I think that's going to be the direction we go. Because I don't see necessarily another player I would take or feel like I would have to take at this point. Here's what we're going to do. This pick for me is going to be Kyle Monangai. So Kyle Monangai, I talked about him again. We talked about him quite a bit, I feel like, through mock drafts, but just something I looked at recently. I thought this was interesting. I was watching Kyron Williams highlights, just film, because I never really actually watched him play. I was curious what type of runner he was. Reminded me a lot of what I've seen from Monangai, so I started watching them both. These guys, man, they play the game almost the exact same way. The only difference is that Monangai does not fumble the football. But similar size, right? I mean, obviously, he didn't. Well, shoot. The Kyron Williams did not necessarily test at the same size that Monangai did. He was like 20 pounds lighter, but he's up to the size that Monangai plays at. And Monangai was more athletic as a player. It's a very similar style of running. They move the same way. It's these quick little cuts to get past defenders. Really tough style of running. I think Monangai really profiles extremely similar to what Kyron Williams does. You can also throw out Blake Corum as well. It's another player you'll hear. But I think you want to bring in someone who's going to bring the juice on offense. Someone who's going to just run through someone's face, right? Someone who wants the contact, wants the smoke, and can get your offense that physical edge they set the tone in games. I think Tank Bigsby helps with that, but it clearly has not been enough. So getting a player like Kyle Monangai in here, who I legitimately think can be an NFL starter. I think he could be a good one for an NFL team. Getting him on this team, getting him involved, gives you a little bit of that edge. And if you were going to ask me what running back I'd want to take a shot on after the, day one, early day two guys, this is the guy for me. So that's going to be our pick at 88. We've got 6 selections left still, which is just crazy. So we'll probably move through these a little bit quicker. And I apologize. There's some players I have not watched yet. I'm going to try to get to them soon. Jared Wilson is an example. If I watched him, maybe he'd be the pick there, just because we do have a need at center. But I don't want to pick a player without knowing who they are or having watched them. So at this point, there's some good prospects still left. I would consider Caldwell if I had watched this film. He's another guy who I have on my list right now. Rashard Smith, it's like your Tyrone Tracy of this class, converted to running back from wide receiver. Had a good year. I don't think you bring him in if you've got 3 guys already. Doesn't make a ton of sense. I think tight ends, you got some legit options here. It might be a little rich for Urosic, who I'm a big fan of. And I don't know if he goes drafted. I think he absolutely should. I think he could be a good tight end too in the NFL. Maybe even a starter for a team. He plays that kind of way. Mitchell Evans might be the pick here. Big guy, great blocker. Also did a solid job as a receiving tight end. Got Kyle Williams as well. I have not scouted him, but I've watched a decent amount of him from the Senior Bowl, so I would feel comfortable if we had to take him. Bashal Tuden has fallen down the board. Said I was going to go quicker with these, but I'm scrolling into the 3rd page as I say that. So let's move back here. This pick, we're going to take a player who was tight end 2 at the start of this year. Dealt with injuries, but ultimately I think is still the same guy. Really good value here. Get another great blocker on this offense. Fill what's going to be a need, I would bet, if they move on from Evan Ingram, which I'm expecting, but obviously is not a 100% for sure thing. We're going to address that with Mitchell Evans. Guy who came in at like nearly 6'6", 258 pounds, really good frame. You're going to bring that guy in, help your run blocking, and ultimately can also function as a very good receiving threat. It's now 125 for us. Rashard Smith is still here. Benjamin Urosic is as well. I might consider going back there. Kyle Williams is here. He's got some great speed. He showed that off at the Combine. I'm curious what he ran. I think it was in the 4th. You got Jack Betch, obviously, but at wide receiver, if you're moving on from Christian Kirk, at this point, you still have a need on the outside. You could add another player like this. Even if he's not a starter, you're picking him in the 4th round. I think he can be a good part of your offense. And so, considering who's available, even though I don't have him fully scouted at this point, I think I've watched enough to comfortably say Kyle Williams would be a nice pick for the Jaguars with this selection from Minnesota. So he's our 4th round pick. We're going to speed this up just because no more trades at this point. Urosic is still here. That probably will be the direction we go. You got some other good players here too. Tuden's got a fumbling issue. That's probably my major concern. Emory Jones, I don't know if he works out in the NFL, but this would be a really good developmental guy. Also think they'd like the intangibles with him. I don't think there's any concerns there. Let's go that direction. And this could be your Leonard Taylor type of faller from last year, where he went from first round buzz to UDFA. I don't think Jones falls as far just because the tools are still really good. But this could be where he goes now with everything that's happened. Benjamin Urosic's gone, unfortunately. But we take him in a lot of mock drafts, so we'll be all right. We got 3 more picks here. Jay Higgins, definitely a player we could go with. Miles Frazier should be gone way earlier than this. If he was here, you're running up to the podium for him. I think he could actually start in the NFL as a guard and be a pretty good starter as well. Hunter Wohler is another guy that I would consider at this point, who I think is just going to be a good starting safety. So it'd be Hunter Wohler for me, or the other guy threw out who was, oh my gosh, I'm already forgetting. We're this far into the mock draft. Jay Higgins. I'm going to say in this situation, Higgins, maybe he falls a little bit further, but Wohler, I think, can be a starting strong safety in the NFL. He's a big guy. He's going to be great for the box, good enough athlete, and I think he's really overlooked in this class. I think you could actually steal a starter at this point, even if I wouldn't necessarily want him to be the ideal starter. Like, it wouldn't keep me from investing at the position, but it's at least great to get depth like that at the bare minimum, and that's worth the pick here. Now, Jay Higgins still available. We've obviously got our linebackers, but some of them are going to come up on their final years. Chad Muma is one of those guys, right? We'll see if Devin Lloyd gets the 5th-year option. It's all stuff to consider. But Jay Higgins, look, he didn't test out well, but this guy still is a very good football player. That's what matters at the end of the day. There may be limitations, but if there's injuries at that position, this is the kind of guy you want to get in. Someone who's done a hell of a job over the last couple of years. See some incredible grades from PFF. So he's going to be our pick. And we'll have one more selection here at 223 and wrap this thing up. This might be a quarterback. So as long as there's not like some crazy name sitting in here. Holland Pierce. This is the craziest size we've seen. I think he's like the biggest tackle I've probably ever seen a measurement for in my life. Yeah, so looking at the rest of the board, this is probably going to get into like kickers and punters down here. This is going to be quarterback for us. Get our backup. I think best prospect that you could probably select here, it would be Tyler Shaw or Curtis Rourke. And for me, at this point, I think that Tyler has a little more upside. He has some exciting play. Also a pretty big guy, I believe. Yeah, 6'5", 225 by this. I know he's got actual measurements. I just don't remember what they are. It'd be him or Curtis Rourke. I'm going to say in this situation, we're going to take Tyler at pick 223. And that is going to be our mock draft. So not conventional, right? Not what we've normally done. Going a bit of a different direction. Maybe shouting out some guys who stood out the Senior, or not the Senior Bowl, the Combine. But still, I think this is a really good haul. I think you're getting a lot of impact players. Barron, wherever the heck he plays, he's going to be awesome in the NFL. And he's one of those guys, like, the argument they make for Will Campbell and saying he's just going to be an incredible offensive lineman, same thing applies to Barron. And I would honestly not have a huge problem if he went over Will Johnson. I think it's debatable. But I just think Barron is going to be awesome in the NFL. And then to get Jack Betch in here, who I think could be a really good receiver. Going to do a lot more than catch the ball as well. Going to be an impact in your run game. Help you get things going. You're going to pair him with, Brennan Strange at tight end, Mitchell Evans at tight end now as well. Wyatt Milam coming in, probably playing right guard for you. Bit of a change. But making those moves, adding to your secondary, getting another running back who's going to set the physical tone. I think this would be a really good draft for the Jaguars. Once again, not conventional, not the most likely outcome, but still, I think you'd be happy with this draft once you saw the players on the field. Maybe not after draft night. You're like, we took a 5'10" corner at 10th overall. Maybe that's a question for people, but I just think he's going to be an incredible player. And Brian Branch is a guy who probably should have gone first half of the first round. If Jahdae Barron's anything like that, well, this is where you should go. So that is our mock draft. I believe this is 3.0. Hopefully I got that right. Sorry if I didn't, but you'll see it anyway on the title of the video. So with that said, appreciate y'all watching. Want to shout out our channel members real quick. Premier Nasir 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Scrubber Ducky 500, Frangies, and Brian Foster. Thank you all for your support. Let me know your thoughts, just final thoughts from the NFL Combine. Just wrapped up, so still fresh in the memory. What you want to see from the Jaguars in free agency. You want to go spend big. You want to save. That's going to be the next focus for this team, right? We're going to talk about maybe some of the targets. Going to do a lot of research into that this week. You'll have a good amount of content off of that and probably some predictions before next Monday. And hopefully I'll be able to get part of Monday off next week so that I can cover it. I'm sure I'll be able to. That shouldn't be a problem. So thank you all for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.